Keanu Reeves had always been a figure of mystery and warmth in Hollywood. He wasn't the type to revel in the spotlight, and despite his incredible success, he never flaunted his fame. He kept his personal life private, always focusing on his work. Whether it was in action-packed films like The Matrix or more thoughtful, quiet roles in movies like The Lake House, his fans loved him not just for his acting, but for his genuine humility. So when Keanu was invited to appear on a popular talk show one summer evening, many in the audience were buzzing with excitement. It wasn't every day that a star like him graced the stage, and fans were eager to see the man behind the movies. The talk show host, a seasoned TV personality known for his witty humor and playful banter, was equally excited. The show was known for being a bit lighthearted, with hosts often poking fun at their guests in good spirits. This time, it seemed, Keanu was about to be the next subject of the show's usual jokes. As Keanu walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. His appearance was as calm and unassuming as always. He wore a simple black jacket over a dark t-shirt paired with jeans. Nothing too fancy, nothing too flashy. But what caught everyone's attention was the small cross necklace that hung around his neck, resting just above his chest. It wasn't a huge, shiny accessory that screamed for attention. It was small and simple, made of silver, with a design that seemed to suggest a deeper meaning. Yet in a world of lavish celebrity appearances, the necklace was noticeable. Keanu's modest, grounded appearance, combined with the subtle cross around his neck, seemed to say something about the man himself, a quiet, reflective soul amidst the chaos of Hollywood. The host, who had prepared his usual set of jokes, noticed the necklace immediately. He had a reputation for being playful, and like many others, he loved poking fun at celebrities. But as Keanu took his seat, the host's eyes lingered on the cross. He saw an opening for one of his signature playful remarks. "So, Keanu, I have to ask," the host began, leaning forward with a grin. "I see you're sporting a little cross there. Are you trying to send us a message, or is that just a new fashion trend? I have to say, it's definitely an interesting choice for Hollywood, where we usually see, let's say, more bling." The audience chuckled. They had come to expect light-hearted banter, and the joke seemed to hit its mark. After all, celebrities often wore extravagant jewelry, and a simple cross was something that, in the world of flashing lights and extravagant fashion, stood out as a bit unusual. The host's tone was playful, almost as if he was trying to nudge Keanu into a laugh or a witty comeback. But Keanu didn't immediately respond with a joke. Instead, he sat back in his chair, his face neutral, eyes focused, as though he was thoughtfully considering how to answer. The silence between them stretched just long enough for the audience to feel a subtle tension. It was the kind of awkward pause that makes everyone in the room wonder whether something has gone off course. The host, sensing the silence, continued. "I mean, Keanu, I'm not judging, but it's not exactly what we see at the latest movie premieres, right? No gold chains, no oversized rings, just a simple cross. I thought maybe we'd get a little bit of a flashy entrance. Guess I was wrong." The audience laughed again, but this time there was a slight hesitation in the air. They didn't quite know how Keanu was going to react. Keanu still didn't smile. He didn't laugh or joke back. He simply took a moment, looking at the host with a steady, calm gaze. And then he spoke. "It's not about the fashion, actually," Keanu said quietly, his voice still warm but firm. "The cross means something to me. It's not a trend or a joke. It's a personal belief." The studio went quiet. The host, who was used to playful back and forths, paused for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The tone in the room shifted, and for the first time since Keanu had sat down, the audience began to feel the gravity of the situation. It wasn't a simple laugh or a joke anymore. It was a real moment, one that spoke to Keanu's personal values. The host's playful smile faded slightly, and he looked down at his notes for a brief second, trying to recover from the unexpected direction the conversation had taken. But Keanu wasn't done yet. He continued, speaking slowly, but with a quiet intensity that caught everyone's attention. "For me, the cross is a reminder," Keanu said, his eyes never leaving the host. "It's about faith. It's a part of who I am, and it helps keep me grounded. It's not something to be laughed at or made light of. It's something I wear because it's meaningful to me." There was a shift in the air. The audience, who had been laughing along with the host just moments earlier, now sat in stunned silence. They could feel the weight of Keanu's words. In that instant, the atmosphere of the show changed. It was as if everyone in the room, from the audience to the crew, suddenly understood that Keanu wasn't just another celebrity. He was someone who lived by his principles, someone who didn't feel the need to conform to the pressures or expectations of the entertainment industry. The host, who had never intended for the joke to come off as disrespectful, now found himself in a position of humility. He had made a mistake by laughing at something that meant so much to Keanu. He could feel the shift in the audience's energy, and it wasn't lost on him. The host cleared his throat, his expression now more serious. "I'm sorry, Keanu," he said, his tone sincere. "I didn't mean to make light of something that's important to you. I respect that. I respect your beliefs." Keanu nodded slightly, his expression softening. He didn't seem angry or upset. Instead, he radiated a sense of calm, as if he had expected the moment to unfold this way. He wasn't offended. He wasn't going to let something trivial like a joke derail his sense of self. Instead, he simply wanted to share a part of who he was. And in doing so, he reminded everyone in the room of something deeper: the importance of respect, of recognizing that there's more to people than just their public image. The audience, who had been unsure of how to react, began to clap. It was a slow, hesitant round of applause at first, but it grew louder as the realization hit them. This wasn't just an actor on a talk show. This was someone who stood by his beliefs, who didn't play the game of fame the way others did, and who, despite his success, remained genuine and grounded. For Keanu, it wasn't about making a statement. It was just about being himself. But in that moment, his simple response had said more than 1,000 flashy outfits or extravagant gestures ever could. The host, now visibly aware of the tone of the room, shifted the conversation. "So," he said, trying to bring the lightness back into the conversation without making light of Keanu's beliefs. "Let's talk about your movie then. I'm sure everyone is dying to hear about it." And so the show moved on. But the energy in the room had shifted. It was no longer just another talk show. It was a moment of authenticity, one that had shown the audience who Keanu Reeves really was. The moment wasn't just about a cross necklace, it was about the man wearing it. The mood in the studio shifted, and it wasn't just because of Keanu's response. It was more than that. The crowd had expected the usual mix of celebrity banter, the kind of jokes you'd expect from a talk show. But what they got instead was a moment of realness, a rare glimpse of who Keanu Reeves was beneath the Hollywood persona. As the conversation slowly steered back toward lighter topics, it was clear that something important had just happened, something that would stick with everyone long after the show ended. The host, now keenly aware of the atmosphere, made a conscious effort to steer the conversation in a direction that would let Keanu share more about himself without making anyone uncomfortable. It wasn't that he had planned this shift. No, this was one of those moments that can't be scripted, a moment where reality took over the usual flow of things. Keanu's authenticity had created a space where people, including the host, were suddenly more aware of their own words and actions. "So," the host said, leaning forward with a smile, "I guess we can talk about your upcoming movie. I know the fans are dying to hear about it." He paused, and for a moment, Keanu's calm gaze seemed to be weighing whether to dive into another subject or stick with the film. Keanu smiled lightly, that familiar glint of warmth in his eyes. He was always gracious, always willing to share, but in his own quiet way. "Yeah, it's called The Path Ahead," he said, his voice steady but filled with passion. "It's a story about perseverance, finding your way in life when the world seems uncertain. It's about the human spirit and how we all have our own journey to make." The host nodded. "I can see why it'd be something close to you. I mean, that kind of message fits your personal philosophy, doesn't it?" There was no hint of sarcasm in his voice now. Instead, he seemed genuinely curious. Keanu nodded again, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "It does," he said softly. "The film talks about challenges, but also about how people connect with each other when they're at their lowest. It's about finding your tribe, your people, the ones who understand you. And it's also about growth, learning, evolving." Keanu paused for a moment, reflecting. "Sometimes we get so caught up in where we think we should be that we forget to look around and see the people who are right there with us." There was something about the way he spoke. It wasn't rehearsed, and it didn't sound like he was just promoting a movie for the sake of it. There was a sincerity to his words that struck everyone in the room. The audience, who had been so caught up in the earlier laughter, now listened intently, their focus entirely on Keanu. The host, picking up on this shift, asked, "It seems like the film is pretty personal for you. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you felt like you were at a crossroads?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "Oh, absolutely. I've had a few moments like that. Life's funny, you know? It throws a lot of curveballs at you, and sometimes it feels like you're just stumbling through trying to keep your balance. But you learn something from every challenge, even the ones that feel like they might break you. I've had my share of tough times, but they've shaped who I am, and that's the thing, I don't regret any of it." The host, genuinely moved, leaned back in his chair. "You've been through a lot, Keanu. I mean, from personal loss to career highs and lows. It's inspiring how you've kept such a grounded perspective through all of it." Keanu gave a small smile. "I think the key is to not take it all too seriously. You have to keep perspective. Life is hard enough as it is without getting too wrapped up in things that don't matter in the long run. It's about relationships, kindness, and being there for the people who matter. I think that's where true success lies." The host nodded, clearly impressed by Keanu's sincerity. The audience, too, could feel the sincerity in the room. This wasn't a typical celebrity interview, where actors rattle off talking points and promote their latest projects. No, this felt more like a conversation with someone who truly valued the moments that made up life. Someone who didn't chase fame but allowed it to come naturally. As the conversation continued, Keanu shared more about the film. He spoke about the director, the cast, and how they all had a shared vision for the movie. But there was something about the way he spoke about the people involved that made the film feel even more real, more human. It wasn't just about the story. It was about the collective effort to bring it to life. The host asked, "What do you hope people take away from the path ahead?" Keanu thought for a moment, his eyes gazing off into the distance as if he were searching for the right words. "I hope people remember that they're not alone," he said finally. "No matter how isolated or disconnected you feel, there are always others who understand. And sometimes the hardest part of the journey is just realizing that you don't have to go through it by yourself. We're all connected in more ways than we realize." The host smiled, clearly moved by Keanu's words. "It's a powerful message for sure." As the segment continued, it became evident that the entire atmosphere of the show had changed. The playful teasing that the host was known for had been replaced with a deeper, more reflective tone. It wasn't just about promoting a film anymore. It was about understanding Keanu as a person. The audience, too, seemed to pick up on this shift. They were no longer simply watching an actor they admired. They were connecting with a man who had lived through difficult times and still carried a sense of humility and grace. In fact, the host's next question was less about the movie and more about Keanu's own journey in Hollywood. "Keanu," the host began, "you've had one of the most unique careers in the industry. You've played iconic roles, but you've never seemed to get caught up in the celebrity lifestyle. Why do you think that is? What's kept you grounded all these years?" Keanu shifted slightly in his seat, clearly reflecting on the question. "I guess it's because I've never wanted to be part of the whole Hollywood machine. I love acting, I love creating, but I never saw fame as something to be chased. The work is what matters to me, not the awards or the red carpets. I've always felt that my life outside of film is just as important as the work I do on screen. I want to be a person, not a persona." The host nodded thoughtfully. "That's something a lot of people don't understand. The pressures of fame can be overwhelming and many people lose themselves in it." Keanu smiled softly. "It's easy to get caught up in it, I suppose. But I've always had good people around me, friends who keep me grounded. They don't treat me any differently because of what I do, and I think that's been crucial. When you have people who care about you for who you are, not what you do, you stay true to yourself." The host, now in a moment of deep reflection himself, couldn't help but comment, "It's clear you've got a good head on your shoulders. Keanu, your outlook on life is something a lot of people could learn from." Keanu gave a humble shrug. "I don't have all the answers, but I've learned a lot along the way. And the most important lesson I've learned is that kindness goes a long way. It doesn't cost anything to be kind, but it can make all the difference in someone's life." As the interview continued, the audience remained captivated, hanging on to every word Keanu said. His authenticity, his humility, and his ability to be vulnerable without fear made him a rare gem in an industry often filled with facades. There was no pretense, no self-promotion, just a man who had found peace within himself and who was willing to share that peace with others. The host, sensing the end of the segment was approaching, thanked Keanu for being so open and thoughtful. "It's not every day we get to have a conversation like this," the host said, genuinely appreciative of the moment they had shared. Keanu smiled once again, a small but genuine smile. It was a pleasure. As the cameras rolled for the final moments of the segment, the host made sure to let the audience know about the upcoming movie, The Path Ahead, encouraging everyone to watch it and experience the powerful story for themselves. The show wrapped up with applause, but it was clear that what everyone would remember most wasn't the jokes or the promotion. It would be the authenticity, the quiet strength, and the wisdom that Keanu had shared in just a few short minutes. As the talk show came to a close, the energy in the studio felt different. The lights dimmed slightly. The applause from the audience began to die down, but there was something deeper lingering in the air. The usual buzz that accompanied the end of a talk show segment was muted this time. People were still processing what had just happened. A simple interview had turned into something far more meaningful, something that would likely stick with everyone who had been a part of it for a long time. Keanu had wrapped up his promotion for The Path Ahead, but more importantly, he had left an impression on the entire studio. The way he had handled the earlier moment with the necklace, the calm and thoughtful way he had spoken about faith, the quiet wisdom he had shared without ever trying to impress anyone, it was unlike anything the audience had expected. It was also unlike anything the host had expected, and it made the usual pomp and flash of Hollywood seem suddenly irrelevant. As the show ended, Keanu stood up, offering a smile to the host and the crew. His thank yous were brief but sincere, and his movements were slow and measured, as though he was giving everyone in the room the respect they deserved. No rushing, no hurry to leave. It was as if he knew that what mattered most wasn't the number of people he had to talk to next or the next big thing he had to do. He was simply present in the moment. The host, still a little taken aback by how the interview had gone, also stood up to shake Keanu's hand. They exchanged a few more words, but it was clear that the atmosphere had shifted. The usual congratulatory comments after a segment felt secondary now. There had been something deeper in their exchange that both men seemed to be aware of, even if neither one openly acknowledged it. The cameras had already stopped rolling, but a quiet hum of conversation continued in the studio. Crew members, guests, and even the audience slowly began to exit, but many of them were still talking about what had happened during the interview. It was like a ripple effect. Keanu's words had reached beyond the set, beyond the studio, and into the hearts of those who had been present. A few days after the show aired, the moment continued to spread. Clips of Keanu's calm response to the host's joke about the cross necklace went viral. People started to share it on social media, along with their thoughts on how Keanu had handled the situation with grace and dignity. It wasn't the usual viral clip where someone laughed off a joke or clapped back with a witty one-liner. No, this was different. It was real, and people felt that. One clip in particular caught a lot of attention. It showed Keanu without hesitation, explaining the significance of the cross, his voice quiet but firm, while the host awkwardly tried to recover from the moment. The rawness of it, the sincerity in Keanu's voice struck a chord with thousands of people. It wasn't just fans of his films who shared the clip. It was everyday people, teachers, doctors, students, and even those who didn't follow Hollywood, who felt a connection to what Keanu had said. The comments that followed were overwhelmingly positive. Many people praised him for his humility, for choosing to speak from the heart instead of giving the usual scripted, rehearsed answers. Others appreciated the way he hadn't let the moment escalate or cause any drama. Instead of getting defensive or angry, Keanu had responded with calm and dignity. His response wasn't about getting back at the host. It wasn't about showing anyone up. It was simply about staying true to who he was, no matter the circumstances. "I've always admired Keanu," one comment read, "but this is next level. His ability to handle things with such grace in an industry that thrives on drama is so refreshing." "I don't know why people don't talk more about how grounded he is," another person shared. The world could use more people like him. It wasn't just random people on social media either. Other celebrities, who often lived in the same bubble of fame and public scrutiny, took to their platforms to speak up. Several actors, directors, and even musicians shared their respect for Keanu's response. One particularly moving post came from a fellow actor who had worked alongside Keanu in a previous film. The actor wrote, Keanu's authenticity is something we all need to learn from. In a world full of noise, he reminds us that we don't need to shout to be heard. The viral moment also sparked a broader conversation about the way celebrities are treated in the media. For years, people had enjoyed making fun of Hollywood stars, often poking fun at their appearance, their relationships, or their personal choices. But Keanu's response reminded everyone that celebrities were human too. They had their own beliefs, their own values, and their own boundaries. And sometimes it wasn't okay to make light of those things just because they happened to be in the public eye. The host of the show, too, learned from the experience. In an interview the next day, he took a moment to publicly apologize for his comments on the air. "I want to take a moment to say that I deeply regret the joke I made about Keanu's necklace," the host said. "It was thoughtless, and I didn't mean to disrespect him or his beliefs. What happened on the show was a lesson for me in how we need to approach people with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from." Keanu handled the situation with such grace, and I am grateful for his understanding. The apology didn't just come from the host, though. It came from the entire talk show team, who recognized that they had unintentionally crossed a line. The response from fans, the media, and even other celebrities had made it clear that the moment had touched a nerve. It was a wake-up call for everyone involved in the production, reminding them that sometimes the boundaries of good taste were more important than getting a laugh or a quick joke. Keanu, for his part, didn't make any public statements about the incident. He didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than anything he could say. He had already handled the situation with grace and clarity, and there was no need to revisit it. Instead, he continued on with his schedule, promoting his film and working on other projects. But the respect for him only grew in the wake of that moment. It wasn't just fans or celebrities who took notice. The media, which often fed on scandal and controversy, found itself struggling to keep up with the narrative. There was no drama to report, no conflict to sensationalize. All they could do was report on the kindness and calm that Keanu had displayed. It wasn't the usual headline-grabbing story, but it was one that made a lasting impression nonetheless. As the days passed, the ripple effect of Keanu's actions continued to spread. People in different parts of the world shared stories of how Keanu's words had inspired them to approach their own lives with more humility, more kindness, and more thoughtfulness. Some spoke about how they had been inspired to reconnect with their faith, while others simply felt encouraged to be more genuine in their everyday interactions. It was a reminder that kindness, authenticity, and respect had a power all their own. Keanu Reeves had not only promoted a movie, he had inadvertently reminded everyone of the power of being yourself, even when the world around you is full of noise and distractions. He had shown that staying true to your beliefs, your values, and your integrity was something worth applauding no matter who you were or how famous you might be. And in a world that often felt like it was losing touch with these ideals, his example was a beacon of light. As the weeks went on, the path ahead continued to do well at the box office. But it wasn't just the film's success that people were talking about. It was the lessons they had learned from Keanu, the man behind the role. His simple but powerful response to a joke had changed the course of an entire interview, and in doing so, had changed the way many people thought about celebrity, humility, and the way we treat one another, and in the end, that may have been the true success of that day. The film would be remembered, yes, but it was the moment of realness that would stay with everyone far longer than any box office number could. As the weeks passed, the interview continued to ripple through social media, news outlets, and everyday conversations. What had started as a simple exchange between a host and a guest had become something much more. It was as though Keanu had unknowingly sparked a larger discussion about how we treat others, how we communicate, and what we value as a society. The moment of his calm, collected response to the joke about his cross necklace wasn't just an isolated event. It had become a conversation starter. People began reflecting on the way they interacted with one another, both online and in person. And it wasn't just fans or the media who took note. Keanu's colleagues, friends, and even people from outside the entertainment world started sharing their thoughts. They admired his humility, his ability to stand firm in his beliefs without the need for confrontation or anger. The more people thought about it, the more they realized how rare that kind of authenticity was in today's world. In an industry driven by image and spectacle, Keanu had chosen to respond with sincerity. His refusal to let the moment escalate, his willingness to explain his beliefs without hesitation, and his respect for himself and others made him stand out in a way that few celebrities ever do. It was a lesson that many took to heart, especially those who were used to the fast-paced, often superficial nature of celebrity culture. For Keanu, the entire experience had been an interesting one. He didn't seek attention or validation for his response. He didn't crave the praise or the headlines. But as the buzz continued to grow, he started to feel the weight of the impact he had unintentionally created. It wasn't about him, it was about what he represented. To many, he had become a symbol of integrity in an industry that often seemed devoid of it. In interviews after the talk show aired, Keanu remained as humble as ever. He answered questions about the film with the same quiet passion he had shared in the original interview. But he also spoke more about the experience of being part of a larger conversation. "I think," he said in one interview, "it's easy to forget that our words matter. Every day we're talking to people, interacting with them in ways we don't even realize. And sometimes we don't think about the effect that can have on someone. We all have our beliefs, our values, and our histories, and it's important to respect that." The simplicity of Keanu's message resonated with many. People often tried to complicate things, to turn situations into debates, arguments, or performances. But Keanu had shown that the most powerful messages were often the simplest. The idea that respect for others, regardless of their differences, was the key to building a better world, felt like a truth that had been forgotten. His words reminded people to pause, think, and choose their words wisely. Meanwhile, the host, who had been at the center of the controversial moment, also found himself reflecting. He wasn't used to such a personal, serious interaction on a show that was typically filled with lighthearted banter. In many ways, he realized that he had learned just as much from the experience as the audience. He'd made a mistake, but it was one he had the chance to grow from. Publicly admitting his error had been difficult, but it was also liberating. The outpouring of support for both him and Keanu showed him that people valued honesty and humility, even from those in the spotlight. The host began to take a different approach to his interviews. He realized that people weren't just interested in the latest gossip or scandal. They wanted real conversations, moments where they could connect with someone on a deeper level, and he knew that he wanted to bring more of that into his show. From that point forward, he made a conscious effort to ask questions that allowed his guests to share their true selves, not just their promotional material. Keanu's influence extended beyond just the entertainment world. The clip of the interview, along with his response, had been shared by countless individuals who worked in various fields. Teachers, counselors, doctors, and business leaders found themselves discussing the importance of empathy, communication, and respect. Keanu's handling of the situation reminded everyone that no matter your profession, your status, or your background, kindness and understanding were universal values that could create real change. In one particular interview, a well-known author spoke about how she had used the clip in a lecture for her students. "It's not just about celebrity culture," she explained. "It's about how we, as individuals, shape the world around us. We live in a time where it's easy to react impulsively, to let our emotions drive us. But Keanu showed us that taking a step back, being calm, and respecting the other person's perspective is the way forward." The teacher went on to explain that the reaction in the studio, Keanu's response, was a textbook example of emotional intelligence. "It's not about suppressing emotion," she said. "It's about recognizing them, understanding them, and then responding in a way that doesn't escalate the situation." Keanu did just that, and that's something we can all learn from. As the days turned into weeks, the story of Keanu's response continued to inspire people from all walks of life. It wasn't just about the incident itself. It was about the values he had displayed: respect, humility, kindness, and a willingness to stand firm in one's beliefs without needing to create conflict. It was a simple, timeless lesson that everyone could apply to their own lives. Keanu, meanwhile, went on with his work, quietly observing the ripple effect of his actions. He wasn't one to seek attention, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment from the way his words had impacted others. It wasn't about personal recognition. It was about making the world a little bit better, one small conversation at a time. In a way, the talk show appearance had been a turning point not just for him, but for many people who had been touched by his message. It was a reminder that actions often speak louder than words, and that sometimes the most powerful change starts with a single moment of authenticity. Behind the scenes, there was another shift happening. People in the entertainment industry began to reconsider how they approached their own roles and the impact they had on the public. Celebrities, producers, and even executives started to question whether the typical approach to talk shows, light-hearted, joke-filled exchanges with little substance, was the best way to connect with an audience. Wasn't there room for deeper, more meaningful conversations? Wasn't there value in exploring the real, unpolished aspects of someone's life, their beliefs and their experiences? The entertainment world didn't change overnight, of course, but there was a noticeable shift in how people were approaching their work. The pressure to always be entertaining, to be flashy or controversial, was being replaced by a desire for authenticity. The way the public reacted to Keanu's response had opened people's eyes to the fact that there was more to life than just chasing headlines. Back in the studio, the atmosphere had returned to its usual rhythm. But every now and then someone would mention the interview, either in passing or during a production meeting, and there would be a pause, a knowing look, a shared understanding of how rare moments like that were and how important it was to hold on to them. For Keanu, it was business as usual. But he wasn't blind to the effects of that one moment. He was grateful for the conversations it had sparked, the respect it had earned him, and the lessons it had provided for so many. And in a world where things often felt chaotic and disconnected, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace knowing that, in some small way, he had contributed to something positive. As the buzz around the interview began to fade from the headlines, the message remained. Keanu had shown the world that it was possible to be famous, successful, and still remain true to oneself. And in doing so, he had reminded everyone that the most important thing in life wasn't fame or recognition. It was being kind, being respectful, and always staying true to what you believe in. As time passed, the memory of that interview continued to shape how people saw Keanu and his approach to fame. He became more than just a beloved actor. He became a symbol of something more meaningful, a reminder that being kind, authentic, and true to yourself was something that could transcend the often superficial world of celebrity. The moment with the necklace had changed the narrative around him, not just as a Hollywood star, but as someone who had something to say about life, respect, and humility. In the weeks that followed, Keanu found himself reflecting more on the conversations that the moment had sparked. While he had always been someone who preferred to keep a low profile, he began to realize that this was an opportunity to further the message of kindness and empathy he had accidentally started. It wasn't about making headlines. It was about making a difference, however small it may be. He had been in the public eye for decades, known for his roles in action-packed movies and his quiet, reserved nature. But the response to the interview showed him that people were craving something different. They wanted more than just entertainment. They wanted depth. They wanted connection. And in a world that often felt divided, Keanu's words seemed to be offering something rare, a bridge between people, no matter where they came from or what they believed. The interview continued to be discussed in various circles, even among those who weren't particularly interested in the film industry. Teachers began using the clip in their classrooms to talk about respect, communication, and emotional intelligence. Counselors and therapists spoke about how Keanu's ability to handle a potentially uncomfortable situation with grace was a lesson in emotional regulation. The more people watched the clip, the more they realized how powerful it was. It wasn't just about what Keanu said, it was how he said it. He hadn't tried to win the moment. He hadn't tried to one-up the host or turn it into some kind of dramatic showdown. He simply stood his ground, explaining his beliefs without raising his voice or getting defensive. That calmness was something people could learn from. In fact, many people did learn from it. Some shared stories about how the clip had made them stop and think about how they responded to others, especially in moments of conflict. How many times had they too been quick to react out of anger or frustration? How many times had they wished they'd taken a moment to pause and consider the impact of their words? One woman, who had worked in a high-stress corporate environment for years, shared how the clip had inspired her to change the way she handled difficult conversations at work. "I used to jump right in, always trying to defend myself or make sure I won the argument," she said. "But after watching Keanu, I realized that sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen. Let things settle. Take a step back. I've already started applying that in my meetings, and it's made a huge difference in how I feel and in how others respond to me. For many, the moment with Keanu wasn't just a fleeting viral clip. It was a reminder that we all had the power to shape how we were perceived by the world, and that doing so with kindness and authenticity wasn't just possible, it was the most powerful way to be. And in Keanu's case, it wasn't just about his reputation or his career. It was about using his platform to show that fame didn't need to come with a side of arrogance or entitlement. It didn't need to mean putting others down to lift yourself up. He was one of the few celebrities who had managed to maintain his humanity in an industry that often rewarded the opposite. And for that, people respected him even more. The media's portrayal of Keanu changed as well. Journalists who had once focused on his film roles or his personal life began to highlight his character, his values, and his approach to the world. Articles and interviews started focusing less on his latest project and more on his views about life, his philosophy, and how he navigated the complexities of fame. People began to see him as more than just an actor. They saw him as someone who had found a way to live with integrity in a world that often didn't prioritize it. Keanu, however, remained the same. He didn't seek out more attention or bask in the praise he was receiving. He went about his work with the same quiet dedication that had always defined him. He still preferred to keep his personal life private and didn't feel the need to address the viral moment any further. In many ways, his silence spoke louder than any interview ever could. He didn't need to make a statement about it because his actions had already said everything that needed to be said. In the months that followed, the impact of that one interview continued to ripple outward. It became clear that Keanu's influence wasn't just about the immediate aftermath. It was about the long-term change he had helped inspire. People were beginning to ask themselves more questions about how they treated others, especially when those others were different from them. They were looking at the way they communicated, the way they responded to challenges, and the way they handled moments of tension. In the entertainment industry, a subtle shift began to take place. More celebrities started to embrace the idea that they didn't have to be combative or controversial to stay relevant. They could be themselves, flaws and all, and still connect with their audience in meaningful ways. They could stand up for what they believed in, even if it wasn't the popular thing to do. Keanu had set a precedent, and others were beginning to follow his example. For Keanu, the change was gratifying, but it wasn't something he sought out. He wasn't trying to start a movement or be some kind of role model. He was simply being himself. And in doing so, he had shown the world that there was value in being genuine. In a world that often felt like it was moving too fast, Keanu had reminded everyone that sometimes the simplest acts of honesty, kindness, and respect were the most powerful. He continued to live his life in the same quiet, thoughtful way. He spent time with those he cared about, worked on projects that interested him, and used his platform to support causes that were important to him. But even in his day-to-day life, the ripple effect of that interview was still being felt. People came up to him on the street, in coffee shops, and at film premieres, telling him how his words had impacted them. It wasn't about fame, it was about connection. Keanu had become a symbol of the possibility that kindness could still exist in a world that often seemed to be losing it. Through all of this, Keanu's message remained the same. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up with integrity, being kind, and understanding that every action, no matter how small, had an impact. The way we treat others, especially when we disagree, could make all the difference. As the years went by, that one interview became a landmark moment in his career, not for the reasons anyone had expected, but because it had shown a side of Keanu that people hadn't fully appreciated before. It wasn't just about his roles in films. It was about his ability to handle life with grace, humility, and a deep respect for those around him. And that, more than anything else, would continue to inspire people long after the last line of his film credits rolled. Keanu's influence would continue to ripple through the years, not because he was a famous actor, but because he had shown the world that it was possible to navigate life with dignity and respect, something that would resonate for generations to come.